about the great grift, really a theft, the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich, from working families to CEOs in the history of democratic governing. Minnesota's strong and stable economy is built on our hardworking and brilliant workforce. The actions of the Trump and Republicans in Congress are weakening our economic outlook, as you can see in the numbers today, and prioritizing the wealthy at the expense of working people. Minnesotans are being punished for no reason other than they live in a state that didn't vote for him, and they forgot to become billionaires. The affordability crisis for Minnesotans continues, almost all of it now by choice. Because Republicans in Congress refuse to extend tax credits, health insurance are rising for Minnesota families, and many will go without, not because they don't need it, but because they can't afford it. Trump's tariffs are spiking prices every day for consumers and slashing farm incomes. He's canceling projects and funding in Minnesota, projects we've paid for with our federal income tax dollars that are closing roads, killing jobs, driving up heating bills, and increasing student loan debt. Kicking people off of food benefits and Medicaid will shove hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans out of grocery stores and clinics and into food banks and emergency rooms. Republicans also shifted the cost of programs to state and county governments, and we're already seeing that shift in this forecast and the property tax bills hitting Minnesota's mailboxes now. The people who have had a good year in this economy are the CEOs of tech companies profiting off of our data. Oh, and the Trump family, which made more than $4 billion off the presidency this year. And it's about to get better for them. Those people, the richest 1%, are getting $1 trillion tax cut under this Trump Republican budget. And what do the rest of us get? We get concepts of a plan for health care. We get the new American dream of a 50-year mortgage and vile distractions that pit us against one another. Along with my DFL colleagues, we have done good work for Minnesota in these past 3 years, and I will say how grateful I am for the foresight of my colleagues to invest in Minnesota when we had the resources to do it in public schools, in tax cuts, in food for children. We invested $10 billion into education and health care, and another $4 billion in tax savings for working parents and people on Social Security. We did our part, and we don't, unfortunately, govern alone. The state's budget and family budgets are hard hit by the actions of this compromise, actions of the Congress, despite our efforts to compromise and pass a stably balanced budget last session. Minnesotans are losing services and experiencing increasing costs to fund a Great Gatsby party for the super rich, which I think was at Mar-a-Lago, and a windfall they didn't work for and will never be able to spend. And family budgets and our state budget are bearing the brunt of those changes, taking from working families to give to corporations, tech CEOs, and investor bros is the goal of Donald Trump and Republicans. And it is our job here to do everything we can to fight against this grift and demand Republicans who control Washington to put money and resources back into Minnesota state, communities, and households. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Zach Stevenson, the House DFL leader. Last month was open enrollment, and all across Minnesota, in fact, all across the country, working people saw the cost of their health insurance skyrocket. The biggest single takeaway from this budget forecast is that the same healthcare cost increases that are hitting family budgets across Minnesota are now impacting the state budget. For the last two budget forecasts, Democrats stood up here and warned Minnesotans about what could happen to our state budget and economy as a result of Donald Trump. And now we're seeing the consequences. Higher prices, higher healthcare costs, and more giveaways going to billionaires and big corporations at the expense at the rest of us. As usual, there was a lot of economic data in this forecast, but there was one clear theme. Everything that should be going up is going down, and everything that's going down that should be going down is going up. Jobs are down and layoffs are up. Consumer spending is down and inflation is up. Wage growth for working families is down. but there's never been a better time to be a billionaire. And of course, the biggest single factor, healthcare costs are way up, and Minnesotans are paying the price. We have an economy that only seems to work for the wealthy and large corporations, which makes sense since Trump and Republicans have cut healthcare, food support, and clean energy investments, driving up costs, hurting our quality of life, all to pay for trillions worth of tax giveaways for the same ultra-wealthy and big corporations. Minnesota DFLers are working to fix this broken rigged system and build a future where hard work is actually rewarded, families have a real chance to get ahead, and communities can thrive. You know, as I was driving in today, I heard Speaker Damas say on the radio, and I heard her repeat it here today, that we had cut $5 billion this last biennium. But we should be truthful about that. Over 95% of those spending reductions were passed by the DFL during the 2023 legislative session. Speaker Damas was born on third base, but is claiming she hit a triple. What we did do in 2025 was raise taxes on the wealthiest corporations that have ever existed, and we are certainly grateful for Republican partnership on that. Donald Trump and Republican policies are moving Minnesota's economy and budget in the wrong direction. House DFLers are focused on lowering the cost of childcare, health care, housing, and more to help Minnesotans and address the Trump affordability crisis. Minnesota Republicans need to decide if they're going to join with us in that work or continue to side with Donald Trump and insist that the struggles people are feeling are a con job. And since the governor, wisely in my view, challenged all elected officials who stood before you today to condemn the hateful, racist attacks that Donald Trump has made on Minnesota's Somali community, I will unequivocally condemn them and mark them for what they are. A page of the oldest playbook in the world, used by demagogues across history to, when times are rough, when you're on the political ropes, distract, divide, and demonize other people. The president is seeing higher costs. He knows he's in trouble. His poll numbers are sinking. People are seeing through what he's doing. And so he returns to his familiar playbook that he's been doing now for over a decade of using unacceptable slurs to target innocent people. Thank you. We'll take questions.
Or is fraud accounted in the budget? Should it be? What's your response to the effect the fraud could be having on the budget?
Every single dollar of fraud is unacceptable. Every single dollar of fraud is a dollar that should be going to help a child with autism or a homeless person, and we are outraged by every single dollar of fraud, and we are really glad to see fraudsters going to prison. These scammy businesses that are defrauding the state of Minnesota need to be held accountable, and they are being held accountable. And with respect, I think that there was a little bit of a mischaracterization here. It's not that there isn't an accounting going on of the fraud. The forecast is not the tool to do that. The tool to account for the fraud is all of the BCA investigators that we hired last session. It's the audit that the governor ordered and that the legislature authorized that's going on right now. The fraud needs to be accounted for, and the tools are in place to do that. Just because the budget forecast isn't measuring that doesn't mean it's not happening. It is happening, and it needs to happen because Minnesotans are rightfully outraged about it, and we are outraged too.
Did you need that audit? By the time you hit session, Senator Murphy could take that too.
We need the audit as soon as possible. We need to know, Minnesotans deserve to know, and the governor has taken strong action to ensure that every dollar of fraud is uncovered and that the people who defraud the state of Minnesota are held accountable and sent to prison.
Since we've been talking about fraud, would House DFL be interested in supporting the statewide inspector general? I know it was your caucus that opposed it last year.
Listen, it has been characterized that there's been no work done on this issue, and that's really utter baloney. Before I was even in the Senate, there was work done to detect and prevent fraud. In 23 and 24 and 25, we passed strong state laws regarding nonprofits, the Attorney General's office, and we gave the governors new tools to be able to detect and prevent and stop fraud. They're working. It is difficult, but they're working. The Minnesota Senate worked all session long last year to stand up and move and vet the independent inspector general legislation. Big credit, especially to Senator Heather Gustafson. Big credit to Senator Heather Gustafson. It went over to the House and essentially died there because the Republicans had their own bill that they moved through the committees but it hadn't been vetted or tested in the way that Senator Gustafson's bill was. And on the very last night of session, the House Republicans put Heather's bill up for a vote, Matt Norris's bill up for a vote. It had not been through a single hearing in the House. That is called cover your ass. We expect the House will take up the independent inspector general bill that Senator Gustafson, Matt Norris, and others, Democrats and Republicans together, have passed. We expect it to pass, and we want to put it on the governor's desk. We've done a lot of work.
Yeah, I want to speak to that too. I agree wholeheartedly that this is a really, I think, shameless politicization of the issue. The vote that is being referenced to say that Democrats oppose this bill was taken at the very last moment on the last night of the regular session, and after a global budget agreement had been announced that did not include this proposal. House Democrats are voting consistent with the budget agreement that all leaders, including Speaker Demuth, agreed to, a budget that didn't include the OIG. And I, at this point, think that you reporters should ask Speaker Demuth why it wasn't in the global budget agreement and if she supported it being in the global budget agreement.
And your caucus will go into next session supporting the concept of an OIG bill?
I think what you heard a minute ago is that there's been strong Democratic leadership on an OIG bill. And we will continue to work on it. And absolutely, if that's the solution that we all choose to go to follow, we have no problem with that. We want to take strong measures to combat fraud. I also want to say that I don't think the OIG bill is a panacea to stop fraud. Okay, it is not the solution. It is one tool that can be used. But frankly, I have a lot more faith in the BCA's anti-fraud investigators who we put on the ground last session, to the 50 plus people that we stockpiled, the OIG, the existing OIG in the Department of Human Services, to the Office of the Legislative Auditor, to all of the work, the independent audit that the governor ordered a day ago. There is so much work that has been done to combat fraud. We need to continue doing work until there is no more fraud, because as I said a minute ago, we are outraged by fraud. Every single dollar of fraud that has been identified, it is taxpayer dollars, but you're also stealing from kids with autism and homeless people. Imagine the moral depravity of that, of taking dollars away from the most vulnerable people in our society. House DFLers stand by those people. We want them to get the services that they deserve. We want them to have a good quality of life here in Minnesota.
Inspector General bill, I'm wondering, as you take a look back through the years, is there more lawmakers could have done from an oversight standpoint? Can you now, as you look back, point to missed opportunities that could have stopped this or slowed it down on the front end?
I think if we look backwards, we will see that there has been episodes of fraudulent behavior, defrauding state programs for any number of years. I want to give credit to the Health and Human Services committee members in this last session who embarked on an effort to reform one of the public programs, HSS, Housing Stabilization Services, that was passed when the Republicans were in charge in both the House and the Senate. I do think there's more work for us to do to make sure the programs are strong and are impervious, if you will, to fraud. I think that is very important for us, but we have been consistent. Any effort to defraud public services deprives vulnerable Minnesotans of services that we have put in place for them. Spending tax dollars, putting law into place to protect vulnerable Minnesotans. It also robs Minnesotans' faith in what we do together. And for that reason, we have to reject it. And I'm grateful that this current Inspector General in the Department of Human Services is finding and stopping the fraud that is happening there, though painful as it is. It's important.
The budget, where does the DFL caucus broadly in both the House and Senate look first to sort of offset what we're seeing in the out years right now?
Well, as we mentioned, both Leader Murphy and I, what we're seeing happening at the federal level is a gutting of services, of people's health care, of food benefits and other things that are there to protect the most vulnerable Minnesotans, to finance trillions of dollars in tax cuts for the wealthiest people around the country and the largest and wealthiest corporations that have ever existed. So as we look to figure out how to deal with our budget deficit going forward, we should look at those people who are benefiting so immensely at the federal level. I'll also say, and I thought it's really interesting, the comments that you heard from Budget Director Mingy about what is driving this deficit. You know, she talked about how most of the increase is coming from medical assistance, from health care, and from increased utilization due to outpatient hospital visits and professional services. Okay, that's a mouthful. What does that mean? It means people are sicker. People are sicker, they need more health care, they're using more health care, it costs more. That's what that means. Why is that happening? Well, part of it is because there's been a concentrated and deliberate attack on our healthcare system by the federal government, on public health. And turns out when you do that, people get sicker, and that costs you more money. It is much cheaper to take care of people on the front end, which is why Democrats have, since the beginning, been saying that everyone should have access to affordable, high-quality health care. It saves us money, and we're seeing the proof of it in our budget right now.
To read between the lines here, to say that the DFL will approach this from more of a increased revenue versus cutting spending sort of mindset?
I wish it was that simple, Quinn. We are watching Trump and the Republicans in Congress essentially unravel our healthcare system right before our very eyes. And Minnesotans are already feeling it. They understand the instability of the healthcare system, especially in rural places. They know their premium rates are going up. And I would love to see the Congress vote to pass those subsidies to take a little of the pressure off Minnesotans. I don't think that they're going to do that. I would also love to see the 4 Republicans who represent us in Congress do something on behalf of Minnesotans instead of follow along blindly Donald Trump as they take money from Minnesota and send it off to billionaires like Elon Musk, who is like our first trillionaire, right? We know what is happening. We also know that we cannot replace every dollar that is being taken from Minnesota and sent to the federal government and restore our programs. We need help from the federal government, and I don't know that we're going to get it. The other thing I will say, in Minnesota, we have always led on health care, and we're at a place where we're going to have to look very deeply at what we deliver and how we do it to make sure that we can commit and keep our promises to Minnesotans, that they have access to health care where they live, in a way that we can afford it. It's a very difficult problem. It's not one we're going to solve between now and May of 2026.
There is a way for the state to tackle that structural imbalance without help from the federal government. Like, that seems like, a lofty expectation to have, if you want to rely solely on that, which is kind of out of you guys' control.
Well, ultimately, we have to tackle the structural imbalance because, constitutionally, we don't have another option. We need to have a balanced budget in Minnesota. And I will note that for years and years now, as a consequence of DFL control in 2013 and 2014, and again in 23 and 24, Minnesota has enjoyed large surpluses. In fact, let this be the end. Today, the end of the Republican myth-making about the 2023 legislative session, because the budget that was approved in that legislative session closed in June with a $5 billion surplus, okay? So I don't want to hear anymore about what we did in 23, draining the coffers. There was $5 billion left over in that budget, and that's a history of surpluses that goes way far back. Now, we are seeing, as I said, consequences from rising healthcare costs, consequences that every Minnesotan can relate to as you see our own premiums go up and deductibles go up and copays go up and coinsurance go up. Every Minnesotan can relate to that. The state's experiencing that too. And the solutions to that are going to be very complicated and very difficult. But we don't have a choice but to balance the budget.
Time for one more. Republicans see the surpluses as evidence that the state is overtaxing. What's your response to that?
I think they want to have it both ways here. They want to tell us that we've overtaxed and we're driving the state. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. The fact is that in Minnesota, we have an incredibly high quality of life, and Minnesotans are proud of that. and we want to preserve and protect that. And the Republican plan is to cut the things that make Minnesota a great place to live, to give tax cuts to the wealthiest Minnesotans. And I don't think that's what the average Minnesotan wants.
Thank you. Thank you.